So this shlok has nothing but all those snake names which has originated from Sanskrit language. Other than that, the most famous example in Indian mythology when it comes to the connection of different lords, different characters of Indian mythology and snakes is of course Lord Shiva. So Shankar Bhagwan, as you all know, has a deeper connection with snakes and to be more specific, spectacled cobras. So these three snakes that you can see in this picture, two on the arm wrists, on the biceps, and one around the neck. So all these three snakes symbolize the different time phases of life. One of them symbolizes the past, the present, and the future. Other than that, snakes symbolize a lot of other things like destruction, and other than that, as you can see, they have been worshipped in Indian culture for a long time now. And from north to south, different cultures have different meanings which are related to snakes. But more of this is being inspired in the southern part of India, where there are many temples dedicated to snakes, which are they are literally called as snake temples. Other than that, snakes have been symbol of regeneration, rebirth, and also immortality. So some of the famous symbols are the rod of Asclepius and the caduceus. So famously used in as a symbol of World Health Organization as well as the medical practices. So first of all, this comes from the Greek mythology. So that's why snakes play a very big role in both Indian as well as Greek mythology. So onto the left is the Hermes, the god of trading, and onto the right is the rod of Asclepius, which is held by the god of healing. So Asclepius was a god of healing and wealth as well as medicine. So that's why to give it a importance and symbolizing this particular practice, all the medical practices have been given this modern symbol of Lord of Asclepius and the caduceus. So I would like to start the myths, and these are the top common myths that we have been able to hear since our childhood, or else at some point of time, you must have heard about these myths. And the first myth itself is, I think, one of the most common myths of all time, that the snakes actually take the revenge of their partner's death. So the story is basically very simple. You must have seen all of these movies, Nagina, Nagin, Nag Shakti, and all of those. And the plot is pretty common. So there are two snakes who can shape into humans at command any given point of time, and they fall in love. There is music, there is dancing, and there are lots of scenes involving these two particular snakes shifting from human to snake and snake into human. And ultimately, all of a sudden, one of the snake dies. And what the partner actually does is that they try to capture the face of the culprit, the murderer, and they can actually trace down that murderer and then ultimately avenge the partner's death. So that is, of course, completely wrong. Snakes are not capable of doing that. Let me explain. First of all, snakes develop brain is not there. So they lack this kind of brain that generates lots of emotions. So for someone to generate the need of taking revenge, you need to have empathy. And that's why snakes actually cannot generate empathy, as they lack this kind of developed brain. Thirdly, you're not their prey. So given a choice, snakes will not attack you unless they want to eat you, or you're provoking them or threatening you. And that's why they cannot really picturize you or memorize how you look. However, they can actually memorize uh, a broad outline of a person or a creature, whatever is harming that particular snake, so that the next time it will keep that in its mind, and then try to run away from it, try to scare it away, because it's in their instinct that if something is harming them, they will try to get away from it or try to scare it away. Um, Other than that, there is another myth that is related to this particular one. is that when you kill a particular snake, especially it is quite commonly heard when it related to a common crate. So if you kill a common crate, there are many other common crates that will come into that area out of nowhere. So this particular myth is basically, it has a scientific background to it. First of all, when you kill a particular snake, there will be pheromones all over the place. So pheromones are nothing but chemicals used in communication. And that is how different animals mark their territories. They can communicate with other creatures of same species. And this is the same thing with snakes. So this is also called as homing instinct, where a particular creature comes back to its own territory after maybe a migration or a short duration migration, and so on. So that's why when you kill a particular snake, the pheromones will be spread in the air. It will be onto the thing that you have used in killing the snake. So that's why it's like a response from other snakes that they will try to come into that particular area looking for pheromones and looking for other snakes to challenge and gain the territory. So that was about the famous Bollywood myths that we have been seeing since our childhood, and it's still going on. Next one is another very common myth, which is closely related to the snake charmers of India. We all of us know snake charming used to be a big tradition in India for a long time. There are some of the families who are running this from generation to generation, passing this on as a profession. And but fortunately, right now, government of India has banned the practice of snake charming. But there are still some places where you can see the snake charmers, where you get to meet them, try to understand, the interesting facts behind that particular profession. However, that's completely wrong, because this particular myth I'm going to be talking about, that a lot of people think that snakes can actually drink milk, especially spectacled cobra. Well, however, lots of myths are that we are going to be discussing in this presentation are very closely related to spectacled cobra, as they have been symbol of worshipping, and they have been closely related to Indian mythology for a very long time. So that's why lots of myths are very related to spectacled cobras, and that's why they are the ones who are getting commonly affected because of this. So again, I would like to point out the Shivling has a Sheshnag sculpture very attached to it, used as a canopy, and the usual as a symbol of worship, or as a gratitude. People are kind of, they pour milk on this Shivling as an act of worshipping. And that's the same practice that the people try to connect when they see a spectacled cobra, and that's where the snake charmers come in. Snake charmers, they make their money out of this, where they make the snakes drink milk. So again, snakes cannot drink milk, and I will be explaining to it. So first of all, there is no association towards the milk when it comes to reptiles. It is only specific to mammals. In fact, what makes us mammals, what defines mammal, is something that gives birth to live offsprings, and they nourish the offsprings with their own milk, which they produce in their bodies. So that is the definition of mammals. That is what differentiates from the other animals, reptiles, birds, etc. So that's why reptiles have never had any association with milk. And that's why their bodies have been never developed in such a way that they can digest the milk. For example, enzyme lactase, that's what they lack in the digestive tracts. This is the same enzyme that is necessary to digest milk. That's why even if the snake drinks milk, for example, in this picture, you can see the snake is actually drinking the milk. But I will get to it further on, that how it's drinking the milk. So that's pretty clear that even if the snake drinks milk, it will act as a poison for its body, because since they can't digest it, it will act as a poison. It will create inflation, indigestion, and lots of infection in their body. So ultimately, it will have to vomit it out, or else it will just die of poisoning. So what the wrong practices were behind this was that they used to capture the snakes, keep them dehydrated for months together, and ultimately the snake will drink whatever fluid is close to it. For example, milk in this case. So that's why if you find someone making the snakes drink milk, please try to make them understand, and please try to spread the awareness about this particular myth, because it's still you can see a lot of people, lot of people posting this, or a lot of people believing it, especially in the times of Nag Panchami. Okay, hope all of you are with me till now. And moving on to the third myth, is not more of a misunderstanding. It's not actually a myth, but this is something that a lot of people are still confused with. I think most of the people that I've met, for a layperson, they don't actually know the difference between venom or poison. A lot of people say that a particular snake, if it's a dangerous snake or a snake that can cause you harm, is a poisonous snake and not a venomous, that when it bites you, you will die. So first of all, most of the snakes, over 95% of the snakes in the world are venomous snakes and not poisonous. So the definition is quite simple when it comes to poison versus venom. Poison, you need to breathe in through the skin or through the air into your lungs, or you need to ingest it in your body. Only then it will take its effect. Whereas venom, on the other hand, is nothing but a modified saliva. It is nothing but a complex protein content that the snakes use to either immobilize the prey, to paralyze them, to assist in digestion, as well as, of course, when threatened, they will use this on the predator or whatever is threatening them. Thirdly, uh, poison is something that has been developed into the snake's body for after a lot of years, a lot of time, and it is one of the greatest examples of evolution that the world has seen. So when I said that 95% of the snakes are venomous, so what about the remaining snakes? So when I say 95%, I meant to say 95% of the snakes which can cause you damage as a poison or venom are venomous snakes, but not poison. So the rest of the 5%, the snakes which are both poisonous as well as venomous, are the families of some species of keelbacks. So keelback is a very broad family, and only few species of this family are both poisonous and venomous. Recently discovered, as you can see in this picture, is a tiger keelback found in the southeastern part of Asia. So this is a snake which is an excellent example of evolution, where it has developed a gland which stores poison, and this particular poison is been passed on from the parent to the babies. But of course, the evolution started out somewhere. So their main diet is basically poisonous toads and frogs. And when the evolution was in process, of course, it's a time span of even thousands of years. So that's when the snakes tried to gather all the poison in the nuchal gland. So nuchal area is basically the neck area of the snake, and that's where the gland is present. Um, so the snakes cannot really spit it out or just sprinkle the poison anywhere, but it just oozes out like pus when it comes to specifically the tiger keelbacks. So yes, that's the exception about the poisonous as well as venomous snakes of the world. But again, if you see a snake, for example, when it comes to India, we have the big four snakes of India: the spectacled cobra, the common krait, the saw-scaled viper, and the Russell's viper. All of these snakes are considered as venomous and not poisonous. So if you hear anyone calling out that it's a poisonous snake, please try to correct them. Try to explain it to them that this is not poisonous snake. This is a venomous snake. So all of you must have had this viral images on your Facebook, on your social media platforms, on WhatsApp, and so on, of a picture of multiple headed snakes. So this is again a myth. These kind of snakes do not exist in the wild. These kind of images go viral because people think that this is a form of Sheshnag, the mythological character during the times of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, and of course Lord Krishna. So Sheshnag was a protector of many things. Other than that, he was also a canopy and a sitting for Lord Vishnu, as you can see in this illustration. So this Sheshnag was called as Ananta, and Sheshnag also symbolizes lots of things. Along with the main thing is called as his name was Ananta, and this is a snake that remains even after the apocalypse, even after the end of the worlds. So Ananta means something that keeps on going, that keeps on remaining. Um, so this kind of association with Indian mythology has given birth to the myths. Well, of course, a lot of people do believe in this, and let me explain the myth behind this. This picture looks pretty real to us. Even I myself, when I was young, I used to believe in these pictures because they absolutely looked real to me. But let's take a look at the original image over here. So this is the image from southern part of India. I think most probably it was Karnataka from what I've read, but it also could be in the northeastern parts of India because it's a king cobra which is found in the Western Ghats as well as in the northeastern parts of India, such as Kaziranga and Manas, as well as Jim Corbett and other places, other many places. So this is the original image where you can see a single-headed king cobra, which is the original image as captured by the photographer. This is a cleverly photoshopped image. This is nothing but a digital forgery or a digital manipulation. And this kind of snakes, of course, do not exist in the wild because morphologically they won't be able to gel in together, or the body will not be able to balance out the weight of so many heads. Yet again, there are some of the cases in the wild that exist in the snakes, as well as some of the geckos and other creatures like turtles, tortoises, where there are snakes with two heads. Yes, this is not a digital forgery, but actual cases which exist in the wild. It's pretty common in snakes. But again, these kind of creatures will not will not survive in the wild for too long because every head has a separate brain and every head has a different coordination of itself. So the snake, even when if you try to observe this particular snake, there will be a very strange movement to it. So it won't look normal. So this is nothing but a genetic mutation of physical abnormality, and it's called as other bicephaly. Or when it comes to humans, you must have heard about the conjoined twins. So it's the same case with the snakes over here. So these snakes do not play a role anywhere else but in the exotic and strange pet trade, and of course in the scientific research trying to understand the genetic mutation. So yes, two-headed snakes or five-headed snakes or even three-headed snakes are a part of myth. Two-headed snakes are the only ones, the bicephaly, that happens in the wild. But you will not be able to find five-headed or seven-headed snakes at all. So this is not scientifically true. Since we spoke about Shesh Nag, the mystical snake, so the Shesh Nag is supposedly the protector of a magical gem called as Nagmani. And a lot of people believe that Nagmani is a gem, a kind of a stone. It's also called as a snake stone, which is supposedly inside a viper or a spectacled cobra's head. It is placed inside its head, and this particular gem, if you have it, if you possess it, you can rule over the world, and you can just take over the world very easily. It will give you unlimited wealth as well as many other magical powers. And thanks to Bollywood and Indian television once again for this kind of myth to kind of shoot into the social media platforms. And as you can see, there are lots of places, lots of areas where people believe that this kind of stone actually exists inside the cobra's head, and that's why lots of cobras have been a victim of this particular myth, where they've been captured, their heads being chopped off in search of this particular gem. But of course, there's nothing but brains inside their head, because snakes are nothing but good old-fashioned animals made out of flesh, blood, and bones, just like us humans. Nagmani itself is a myth which was related to Indian mythology, and from what I've heard, is it was used as a folk medicine in Africa, in African traditional medicine. So that's why it does not possess any kind of medicinal properties. It has been scientifically proven. And so it is our duty or responsibility to spread this awareness about the cobras, because if you want to conserve snakes, we have to really spread the awareness about this particular myth and try to tell people not to kill cobras in search of this particular gem. Moving on to the snake charmers of India. As we all know, snake charming is banned in India currently. But the myth is that the cobras can actually tune to the snake charmers. They can dance to the snake charmers tune. So basically, this is true in somewhat way. But what cobras are trying to do is not dance, but they are trying to keep themselves in the shooting range, because they're feeling threatened by the beam that the snake charmers are playing, and so that's why, since it's a long and pointed instrument, they feel like it's threatening them. It's trying to attack the snakes. So that's why when the beam is kind of getting close to them, they are trying to just follow its movements, so that if it gets close to the snake, they will try to just scare it away. So that's why, because the snakes are efficient hunters, they will try to replicate the movement of the predator or even the prey. Another trick under the snake charmer's sleeves is that the vibration that they create with the help of their feet, because the snakes lack true ears, they actually cannot hear the tunes that are being generated through the instrument. They focus more on the vibrations. They are excellent sensors when it comes to vibrations. That's why the vibrating feet actually acts as a main attraction for the snakes to, getting the attraction towards them. So another misunderstanding that we used to have, not just in the minds of layperson or a common person, but also in the minds of lots of naturalists, lots of snake experts used to believe this, and that was true because there wasn't a lot of research done. But a long time back, this was proven wrong. The myth or misunderstanding is that you can actually identify a snake, whether it's a venomous or non-venomous snake, based on its head shape. So if it's a V-shaped head, as you can see, if you can see my pointer, that's a V-shaped head. So there's to say that V-shaped head are a venomous snake. And on the other side, we have a broad-shaped head of a snake. So a broad-shaped head or a round-headed snake is a non-venomous snake. So that was a misunderstanding. So let me elaborate on that. So the right one, the first picture that I showed you, is a wolf snake, a common wolf snake, pretty common all over India. And the reason it gets its name from is because of its narrow snout. So the narrow snout, as the wolf have, the narrow nozzle. So that's how it got its name. And first of all, wolf snake is a non-venomous snake and pretty harmless. Of course, if you catch this particular snake, it's a very bitey snake, so it will give you a couple of bites, but that's it. You won't be dying of this particular snake bite. So they do not have any venom inside them. Plus, on the other hand, on the opposite side, um, onto the left is the one of the deadliest, most venomous snake of India, the common krait, and one of the most dangerous. And it's again as I mentioned before, it's a part of Big Four snakes of India. So the concept of Big Four is basically medically significant Big Four snakes of India. The snakes which are used to generate antivenom, and of course these are the four venomous snakes, which are one of the commonest snakes in India and widely spread all over India. So that's why the most snake bite cases of venomous snakes are because of these four snakes. So let me repeat: these were spectacled cobra, common krait, saw-scaled viper, and Russell's viper. And out of these snakes, spectacled cobras and common krait have broad-shaped head or rounded shaped head. So that's why to say that a V-shaped head snake is a venomous snake is completely wrong. So just call an expert in case you have any doubt. Call out the naturalists or any snake experts that you know of, and try to identify how to know your snakes. In case you come across a snake, just call them and they will do the better job of identifying the snake and just avoid the hassle of, calling out someone to rescue it and everything. Um, Other than that, we also used to believe that you can identify a snake bite, whether it was a venomous or non-venomous, based on the bite marks. So first of all, like I said before, snakes will try to avoid, attacking or biting you at the first place. Given a choice, they will definitely avoid it because they are scared of us even more than we are scared of them. And venom is a rare protein content in their body. So most of the snake bites, when it comes to venomous snakes, is considered as a dry bite, meaning the snakes will bite you, but they will not inject the venom inside your body. So in that case, the poison or the venom, as previously it was considered, the venom ducts that are placed inside the fangs, they will not kind of project that when biting. So the bite mark will not have any fang marks. That's why you can't really tell. The best option is that when in doubt, just run to the closest medical facility which is around you. Of course, not literally run, because that will just pump your blood even at a faster rate. Yes, so once again, cobras, coral snakes, and common kraits have broad-shaped heads. So do not identify snakes based on their head shapes, but try to use different techniques which are there to identify snakes, specific to each and every snake. Okay, hope all of you are with me till now. Next one is very specific to the Western Ghats or towards the Maharashtra side, where these two snakes are found, the flying snakes and vine snakes. Supposedly, they can pierce the top of the head and the eyes, and they can puncture them and suck out the blood from it. So this particular myth also has a lot of misunderstanding, disbelief, and I'm here to break it down. So first of all, both of these beautiful snakes are arboreal snakes. So most of their lifetime, they will prefer staying upon trees in search of prey, in hiding, camouflaging themselves, and basically just resting on the trees. When on trees, these snakes are one of the fastest running snakes on the trees, absolutely fast. And they have excellent skills when it comes to camouflaging, when it comes to hunting. What they will do is that they will perch on a particular branch and wait for the prey to come to themselves. Um, Secondly, where they perch is absolutely about 3 to 4 meters above the ground. Um, so that's why it is very, very likely that when a human passes through that canopy or a foliage, the snakes feel threatened. And when threatened, they will try to bite whatever body part is closer to them. For example, if I'm walking through this particular canopy, my head and my overall face is very close to the snake's perching point. So that's why a lot of times they have bitten the humans either head or nose or even the mouth, and that's how the myth came upon. And I also like to believe that the head shape of specifically the wine snake has a very strange looking face and head. It has a very pointed snout. This is the only snake with binocular vision, as well as the horizontal eye slits, the horizontal pupils. And that's why, because of this strange look, people used to get scared of it. And just another quick fact about the flying snake is that all of us might have been misled with this. Flying snakes that do not actually fly, they cannot gain any altitude. What they can do is like, just like the flying lizards or flying geckos, like the Draco, they can actually just broaden their ribs, flatten their body, and stretch out their ribs, and can actually glide from tree branch to another tree branch in a descending manner. So first of all, yeah, the habitat plays a very important role in this particular myth. The head shape, the strange looks given to it, and again the narrow snout, the sharp pointed snout, which was supposedly used to pierce in the head. But these snakes will not do that, of course. So second last myth is about the snakes that have stings in their tails, and they can actually inject poison slash venom into your body. And there is another myth that is very closely related to it is about the hoop snakes. Many of you might have heard about this particular myth, and as you can see in this particular illustration. So snakes do not have any poison or venom in their tails. Venom is only generated in the venom glands behind their head. And when it comes to poison, as we discussed in the previous myth, inside the nuchal gland. So their tails will not have any poison or venom. That is one point. Another one is that this particular myth came about because of the tail modification or the scale modifications in the snake's tail. And I have few examples ahead. The best example is the shield tails. So this is a beautiful pied-bellied shield tail from the Western Ghats of India. An amazing snake, very docile, and it is very small in size. So I was part of a kind of a rescue team. I had lots of snake experts with me, resident snake experts, which we were rescuing this snake from one of the premises, one of the lodge premises, and then shifting the snake, rescuing the snake, and releasing it just outside the lodge so it can stay in its own territory. So, I was part of a study team, and I was trying to, so I was handling this snake by my hand. And when the snake experts tried to put the snake on my hand, it was giving us a small prick with its tail, just enough prick to give me a little bit of scare. So the tail is pretty strong. It is a modified tail which has the scales very thick. They have thickened the scales over there and created kind of a shield. So as the name suggests, it's called a shield tail. Another example, very common example, and again, another myth that I would like to discuss when we have time is about the sand boas. So sand boa is supposedly it has two heads. So one on the each side of the tail, each side of the body. So that's why this is again a tail modification used to kind of just tease the predator or make them confuse the predator. So again, this is again an example of tail modification where the snake is trying to mimic the head shape towards the tail area to confuse the predator and again just survive. This can be also found in pythons, where the tail has become extremely pointed, a bit sharp, to use it as a defense mechanism. So I would like to also mention about the hoop snakes. So hoop snake is something kind of a myth where the snake actually bites its own tail, creates a loop, and then tries to chase you in that particular manner while rolling with you. And another, from what I heard, was that if you've done some bad deed, this particular snake will hunt you down in that particular manner. However, this particular behavior was only observed in the snakes in captivity, where when they were absolutely sick, about to die, and the snakes who were in extreme agony, so who were biting their own tail in a very weird way. But they were not creating any hoop. So hoop snakes do not exist in the wild. They are not true. Moving on to the last myth, this particular myth I myself used to believe for a very long time because that's what I was taught since the childhood, and in fact it wasn't something wrong, but there was a lack of research that was there back in time. So the myth is that boas, pythons, and other constrictors, when they catch a prey, they kill them by crushing bones of the prey, which somewhat is at some extent is true. But let me tell you that these particular snakes will not crush the bones with that particular intent. These particular snakes, when it comes to pythons in specific, what they will try to do is that they will just constrict the prey. They will try to cut off its blood supply. Because think about it, if you break the bones of prey, it will still take a lot of time for the prey to die. And in that particular process, the snake might receive lots of damage. As you can see in this picture, where my pointer is, the langur has done a lot of damage to this particular python. So that's why What the snake will try to do is like cut off the blood supply completely, causing an cardiac arrest, which is much quicker death as compared to crushing bones. So that's why it is not true that they crush bones. The bones might get crushed in the process of constructing. Another myth that was related that I used to believe that python seems to be specific since they are partially arboreal snakes. They will go upon the tree on a particular branch after eating a heavy meal, and they will coil themselves to the branch and create a tight grip and try to break the bones which they have of the prey which they have eaten. So first of all, again, that is not true if you think about it very deeply. Since the prey is already inside the snake's body, if the snake breaks the bone from the inside, it will just puncture the organs in the interiors. So that's why they will not break the bones. Snakes are pretty much efficient, and they have absolutely amazing digestive systems, very powerful. So that's why once the python has eaten something, they will not need to eat for maybe even months together, depending on the prey size. If it's a big deer, they will not eat for maybe next 4 to 5 months, and that's how it is. However, they will go upon trees in search of birds, bird eggs, or even arboreal mammals like the civets and even rodents and so on. Thirdly, there is another myth that I used to believe that pythons can actually shoot from one branch to another in search of prey, but it is not true. Once again, pythons are a very heavy-bodied creatures, and they are not capable of shooting or going from for that range. However, they are capable of shooting at the prey with an extreme force, biting its head, and then completely coil them and create a tight grip, ultimately cutting off the blood supply, as we discussed. So that's all, folks. That was all about the top 10 common myths of related to snakes. And before ending this presentation, I would like to just give you some of the tips that you can take away home, or you can just tell your kids or people who don't really know that much about snakes. So first of all, as the core motive of this presentation was, do not fall for such myths. If you get to hear a particular myth or a particular story about snake, please do your research and just get to know the how and why behind that particular myth, and yet again spread the word about it. Spread the awareness about this particular false myths or false stories. Uh, the third point I would say was is when it comes to if you encounter a particular snake in your home premises. So first of all, do not try to do anything all by yourself. In case you don't know what snake it is. And first of all, you have to be a certified snake handler, which is issued by the Forest Department of India. You have to have a certificate of snake expert or a snake handler. So first of all, it's pretty simple. Call an expert and ask them to rescue the snake and take it away from your home. If you want to keep the snakes away from your home, you have to clean your surroundings. Try to just get rid of whatever debris or a fallen pieces of wood or a pile of debris. If it is close to your home, just try to get rid of it, and that will definitely keep the snakes away from the home, because ultimately that's an excellent hiding place for the snakes, an excellent hiding place for the rodents, which attracts snakes. So get rid of the main problem, and then it will be you will get rid of snakes as well. The most important point I would say is to get to know the closest facility, medical facility close to your home, and try to check whether they have antivenom or not. Try to speak with the authorities over there. Try to get to know whether they know about the snakes or not. Government facilities, government hospitals are considered as very good when it comes to snake bite cases, because these are the establishments which get most of these snake bite cases, because since when it comes to rural areas, that's where most of the snake bites happen, since people are working in the farms, there are open fields, snakes can get into their houses, and a lot of people they work barefoot on the fields. So that's why snake bites are pretty common in rural areas. They go to the government hospitals and government facilities where they have antivenom. That's why authorities at the government facilities are more aware of these snake bites. But if in case you don't have that, please try to go to the whatever facility that you have close to you and just get the information so that it will help you when you have any snake bite case around you. Other than that, since all of us are me and myself and my team and some of my friends are the people who actually live in the forest, we work in the forest, naturalists, managers, the staff of the lodge, and other people who are working with forest department. We follow very strict outdoor etiquette, um, which which also includes keeping a distance from not just the snakes but any animal for that matter. Um, but again, so a lot of questions that I commonly get is that what happens if you actually encounter a snake, if you're out in the field, if you're out in the forest with the guests, and if you encounter a snake. So first of all, do not panic. The snakes are not gonna attack you without any particular reason. So if you maintain your distance, do not do any sudden movements or any fast movements. Do not get close to it or throw any stones or something like that. And the snake will just try to do its job. It will just go away. So these are the outdoor etiquette that you need to follow. Closed shoes are compulsory, and many other things that are considered as outdoor etiquette in general. Thank you so much. That was all about the top 10 myths of snakes. And please follow us on Pagdandi Safari's pages on Facebook as well as Instagram. So over to Mugdha.
Thank you, Swanan, for such an informative talk. Now, Kshitij will answer your questions. Due to the time limit, we won't be able to answer each and every questions of yours, but we'll try to cover maximum of them. And if not, you can always get back to us by email. So here is the first question to you, Kshitij. It is by Rohan Sangi. Is it always believed that when you encounter a snake, you stay still and not move around, which will shoo them away? Is it true?
Thank you, Mugda and Swanan, for the great information. Actually, when you encounter the snake, most of the time, if you stand still at a safe distance, snake will pass away. But if you are in a very close vicinity and you know the behavior of the snake, then it's always better to move back a little bit with a slow steps.
Okay, thank you, Kshitij. The next question is by Renu. Can you just explain us what is venom exactly?
Swanan had already explained a bit what is the venom. Venom is a like a modified kind of a saliva or is a toxic chemical with a complex protein formation in it. And as anybody, unless once it's injected in the body or the bloodstream.
Okay, I hope it's clear to you now. So the next question is by Ms. Sheila Raghu. Do the big ant hills have snakes in them?
Hello, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is by Ms. Sheila Raghu. Do the big ant hills have snakes in them?
When the snakes do find empty termite mound on hill, they prefer to sneak in and to get the shelter. But few snakes do get in to just feed on the termite eggs or other rodents who are staying in.
Okay, thank you so much, Kshitij. So the next question is by Kartikeya Singh. Is there a threat of life to the python that was bitten by the monkey?
Yes, the python was bitten by the monkey.
No, I think so. The question was that is there a threat for the life of the python? So I think depending on the damage, judging by the picture, I don't think it was a life-threatening situation for the python. But since we don't know actually that where are the other bite marks at the python's body, we can't really see it. But I think if there are simultaneous bite marks, I think that must have been a threat for the life of python. So what do you, Mugdha?
I can see a question by Rima Singh.
Okay, so I think there was there is a problem with the internet. So if all of you can hear me, the question is by Ms. Rima Sen. Can you again tell the difference between poisonous and venomous snake? So venomous snake is basically venom is you need to it needs to get in contact with the blood for it to start its effect. Whereas poison, on the other hand, you need to breathe in through the lungs or through the skin for it to take effect. So I hope that answers your question. Mugdha, would you like to ask about any other questions, or do we still have time? Or
I'll just ask some more questions. So
right.
can you just tell us the difference between the venom and the poisonous snakes?
Yeah, I just answered that.
Sorry for the interruption. Actually, we had missed a few questions again. Now we'll come to an interesting question. It has been asked by Mr. Prana. Is that true? We can check the snake is venomous by checking the pattern of its scales. Yes, that's true. Actually, the more main taxonomy of the snake is based on their scale count and the other parameters on which we can identify the snake species. So based on the scale count of the scale pattern, definitely you can identify whether the snake is venomous or not. Now there's another question. Any suggestion for the trekkers? Yes. While doing the trekking, you are the most one who will become across the snake. So while going through the Karvi or the dense forest patch, is always better to see before putting your feet and taking the hold on a tree by your hand, because these are the places when in the daytime the snakes will be resting, or in the night time whenever they are active, you because of the low vicinity you can come across such kind of a snake. And doing uh, while doing rock climbing, it is also better to check the crevices before putting your hold.
So here is another question on Facebook by Mr. Rachit. How long before your body starts reaching to the venom?
Mugdha, please repeat the question.
So Mr. Rachit says, how long before your body starts reacting to the venom? So how much time you require to actually get started with the venomous thing?
As soon as in most of the cases, as soon as a snake, venomous snake bite you, the venom starts acting on your body because it comes in the contact of a blood immediately. But even there are cases where the venom had actually started affecting after 2 or 3 days on the patient when the snake bite was on the heel or the toe. So it depends on the position of the bite mark where the bite has been done.
Okay, so here is another question by Mr. Anand. Are monitor lizard are dangerous as snakes?
Uh, yes, they are because unless and until they are not that dangerous as but it's better to be afraid of them because if we go too close to them, they might wipe us with the tail. Uh, anyone who is trying to catch them, if they give a bite, it will be a very nasty bite, and the saliva of the lizard we don't know what it may contain.
Okay, so can you tell us how many species of snakes are there in India?
Actually, it's very difficult to answer the question because nowadays, as technology has evolved, the snake number or the discoveries of new species is going on every day. So, for the last count, it was around 278. But in a few days back, like in a last week, there is a new species of a snake has been described from northeast. So, it's very hard to have a particular number, but definitely it's between 270 to 300 species of the snakes currently.
Okay, so the another question is that it's by Vishal Solanki. Uh, does all the snakes of river and the seas are non-venomous?
No, actually, the snakes, few snakes who find in the sea and the river, few of them are deadly venomous, and few are non-venomous.
Okay, so the next question is by Mr. Prashant. What should be one's course of action if one gets bitten by a snake?
If the first thing is if it's possible for you to identify the snake, it's good. If you are not able to identify the snake, it's better to make a patient calm and immediately take the person to medical facility. It's better not to lose any time. In case of a snake bite or venom treatment, the time is precious.
Okay, so few more questions to you. So can you just tell us what is the lifespan of a snake? It's by Mr. Akash.
There has not been proper studies made about the lifespan of the snake, but based on the old observations, it has been said that the few species of snakes can live for 10 to 12 years. Few species of the snakes they can live up to 20 years, and a few more species they can go up to like 20-25 years in wild, in the captivity.
Okay, and here is one interesting question. So, how do cats like tigers and leopards avoid accidentally being bitten by a snake? Is it true they are being can they avoid accidentally?
Mugdha, please repeat your question. Your voice was cracking.
Okay, sorry. So, how do cats like tigers and leopards avoid accidentally being bitten by a snake?
There are chances that they might get bitten by the snake accidentally, but these cats are so clever. If they came across about knowing about the snake, they will try to kill the snake or they will avoid the snake.
Okay, so I think it's our time to wrap up this session. So, Swanan, do you want to say something?
Well, thank you all of you for joining us today. And sorry we could not answer all the questions, but in case you still have those questions, you can feel free to mail it to us, and so we can answer it to them. And for the people who have missed this live session, We have it pre-recorded and it is available to watch later on our pages on Facebook as well as YouTube. You can just type in Pagdanti Safaris and you will find it over there. So tune in for our next live sessions. We will be declaring those pretty soon. Thank you all. See you and have a safe day.
Thank you all.